the ITU, and it's with great pleasure that I welcome you all to the webinar series on digital transformation for cities and communities. Today's episode will be on the topic of cities in the age of artificial intelligence, how to leverage technology for digital transformation. The episode is co-organized by ITU and the United for Smart Sustainable Cities Country Hub in Austria. Digital transformation has propelled innovation and the development of digital technology and has accelerated the shift towards digitization worldwide. Key technologies such as artificial intelligence are quickly being developed and are transforming cities, economies, and organizations. Cities play an important role when it comes to supporting emerging technologies and also the way they are integrated within the city. The same holds true for the adoption of artificial intelligence. This webinar will highlight the benefits and advantages of cities adopting artificial intelligence to improve their services and enhance efficiency. We will hear from city leaders and organizations real-world examples of successful implementation, so stay tuned for this exciting episode. I see many participants have connected today, and I look forward to your active participation during our questions and answer period. I invite you all to drop a quick message in the chat stating your name and the country from which you are connecting from. We have an excellent list of panelists for today's webinar. We are also very privileged to have with us Dr. Bilal Jamoussi, Chief of the Study Groups Department of ITU Standardization Bureau, and Ms. Barbara Kohm, U4SSC Country Hub Leader and Vice President, Austrian Central Bank, who will be providing today's welcome remarks. So without further delay, I would like to pass the floor to Dr. Jamoussi and Ms. Kohm to give us their opening remarks.
Thank you very much, dear colleagues, panelists, and friends. It is my honor and privilege to welcome you to the episode 18 on cities in the age of artificial intelligence, how to leverage technology for digital transformation. This webinar forms an integral part of the ongoing Digital Transformation for Cities and Communities webinar series. Aspiring smart cities worldwide are increasingly relying on technologies to support upgrading of existing services and to achieve long-term socioeconomic goals and prospects in alignment with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Accordingly, we have now witnessed a plethora of cities seeking to drive cross-sectoral digital transformation, whereby expanding on the current smart and sustainable city knowledge terrain and creating a rich tapestry for urban visions. In this context, artificial intelligence is increasingly being embraced to enable cities to provide their inhabitants with the required water and energy supply, while ensuring proper waste management and reduced traffic congestion and pollution. Therefore, in many ways, AI can serve as the digital backbone for managing a diverse range of interconnected tasks within the urban ecosystem. The recent push in AI focuses on automation of several operations in the urban domain, based on a continuous process of data collection, modeling, and analysis, to bring about the transformational changes in the physical realm of the city. In this regard, AI can bridge the gap between cyber-physical systems. However, despite AI's potential in many urban stakeholders' circles discussions regarding AI-centered digital transformation, we have concerns associated with privacy, large-scale application, and deployment. Understanding the complexity of AI implementation in cities, the United for Smart Sustainable Cities, U4SSC, the UN-led initiative, plays a key role in unlocking the potential of emerging technologies in the urban space across different verticals. Through its various thematic groups, U4SSC has been examining the trajectory of use of these disruptive technologies to support data collection and decision-making processes, to allocate resources efficiently, conduct operations, evaluate situations objectively, and enhance city infrastructures. One of these thematic groups is dedicated to guiding principles for artificial intelligence in cities. In this thematic group, with the help of various stakeholders, has formulated guidelines for implementing AI solutions in an efficient manner. Based on these guidelines, this thematic group will also lay forth a framework for cities to leverage in addressing existing challenges of AI deployment in accordance with the Sustainable Development Goals. U4SSC is a unique initiative supported by 17 United Nations agencies. This initiative would not have reached the heights it has today without the persistent efforts of our participants who have continuously contributed to the development of the U4SSC reports and deliverables. I would like to take this opportunity to commend the work of the U4SSC country hubs in serving as an ideal platform for cohesion of digital transformation activities to open up new horizons of innovation in their respective country or region, all of which paves the way for new partnerships necessary to address growing challenges in the urban space. I do not want to give any more spoilers out, but we'll learn more about the U4SSC Country Hub during today's webinar, along with the commendable work that they have undertaken. With that, I would like to conclude my address. Thank you for your attention, and I wish you all an enriching webinar ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Victoria, for your kind opening, and to Dr. Bilal Jamoussi as well, of course. Dear colleagues, panelists, delegates, and participants, I'm delighted to be with you all here for this episode 18 of the Cities in the Age of Artificial Intelligence and How to Leverage Technology for Digital Transformation. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the International Telecommunication Union for co-organizing this webinar together with the U4SSC Country Hub hosted in Austria. This webinar will offer an opportunity to showcase our work and encourage other countries to collaborate and advance our common goals, and to follow the Austrian example and hosting country hubs as well worldwide. As we are now well aware that the emerging technologies such as artificial intelligence, in short AI, and IoT, Internet of Things, offer far-reaching opportunities in smart and sustainable cities to facilitate resource management and support cities in driving digital transformation. The network of devices in IoT has the potential to facilitate data collection, and AI offers the path for fostering decision-making based on the data collected from the connected IoT devices. And we will see a couple of those examples later during our conversation and the discussion. And I'm looking forward to the questions that we will receive for our panelists. So the coupling of those two technologies, namely AI and IoT, could be a game changer in the coming decades. Even in my country, in Austria, we have adopted the Digital Austria Strategic Plan, which lays forth initiatives to strengthen our understanding and approach to digital transformation and aims to hone digital skills to gain the digital competitive edge across sectors. The country has also envisioned the digital roadmap for Austria, which will pave the way for our digital future in the years to come and bridge the digital divide. However, We must acknowledge that the road to digital transformation is not a straightforward one and neither an easy one. Embracing the digital transformation process requires collaboration and joint thinking coupled with the required know-how. So one without the other is definitely not possible. As the data generated from different sources continues to increase, effective data formatting, storage, and processing facilities are required to replace traditional data mining and analytics methods in order to exhaust useful information from the sea of data in the smart city ecosystem. For this, extensive deliberation and guidelines are required. And as you all know, those are challenges not only for the players in the respective cities, but also for the users. So additionally, a smart city, or as smart cities require a dynamic environment, it is also important to adopt flexible technologies. Realizing this is the United for Smart Sustainable Cities, in short U4SCC, I just can't say it enough because we need to promote that, was established in 2016 to provide an open platform for discussions on how smart cities can be envisioned. The U4SCC also takes these discussions a step further by exploring how emerging technologies like blockchain, digital twin, virtual reality, and many more can further support digital transformation and our journey towards smart cities. While the U4SCC, through its various thematic groups, develops reports, case studies, guidelines, and offers guidance for its cities to become smarter and more sustainable while accelerating their digital transformation, this initiative also provides for another very unique mechanism known as the U4SCC Hub. I would like to take this opportunity to tell our audience here that Austria proudly hosts the first U4SCC country hub at the Austrian Economic Center. As I mentioned towards the beginning of my remarks, collaboration and knowledge transfer is key to digital transformation. So the division of labor literally is truly important. In this context, the U4SCC Hub serves as a one-of-a-kind platform which supports cooperation between, on the one hand, public and private sector for driving digital transformation across all sectors in smart cities and communities. And through the establishment of this U4SCC Hub, we are extremely blessed to be engaging with relevant private sector's entities, on the other hand, to realize the smart city goals and facilitate knowledge transfer. We also regularly participate in the ongoing thematic group activities of the U4SCC to provide inputs to deliverable based on our expertise within the Hub. As a part of our Hub activities, we also organize webinars such as this one to further disseminate knowledge that we have gathered through our work on smart cities and digital transformation. I'm very indebted to the U4SCC partners for choosing us as the first U4SCC Hub, and we are truly proud here in Austria. I would like to conclude my address by making one statement. Knowledge is one thing that cannot reduce in amount if we share it with others. In other words, we truly need to collaborate and exchange all that we know, and in order to advance and elevate ourselves and the respective cities. This is the very principle of the work of our Hub, as we are proud to collaborate with ITU and other U4SCC partners across the world. With the hope that this webinar will be the first of many more to come, I will now hand over to our moderator, Victoria. And thank you very much for joining us, and we're looking forward to seeing you much more often.
Wonderful. Thank you both for your welcome remarks. Before we jump into today's episode, I will take a few moments to note how the session will be run. All questions from the audience will be taken during the Q&A session after all presentations have been delivered. Participants can submit their questions by typing in the Q&A box. When submitting a question, kindly type first the name of the panelist to whom the question is addressed, followed by the question. Please note that today's episode is being recorded, and the recording will be made available on the webinar series webpage. All the presentation materials will also be made available on the website after today's episode. So, without further delay, I would like to give the floor to the moderator of session 1, Ms. Tanya Marcos, Vice Chair U4SSC, to kick off the discussion on how to leverage technology for digital transformation. Over to you. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Victoria. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The rapid rate of urbanization brings in its wake numerous challenges, such as the need for better infrastructure, sustainability, pollution, overcrowding, resource overuse, and improved quality of life for inhabitants. Digital transformation to establish smart and sustainable cities are being adopted as the solution to address these challenges and to provide a fertile ground for the implementation of AI innovations and growth of the urban populations. As you have heard during our opening remarks, U4SSC, or in other words, the United for Smart Sustainable Cities, is a UN-led initiative supported by 17 United Nations entities geared towards Sustainable Development Goal 11, dedicated to making cities and human settlements inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable, and the new urban agenda, which serves as the global roadmap for urbanization for the decades to come. The U4SC Systematic Group on Guiding Principles for Artificial Intelligence in Cities has stepped in to bridge the gap between knowledge and implementation of AI by examining a collection of innovative methodologies which delve into how AI can enable real smart city discussions. It also explores state-of-the-art AI-based techniques in urban infrastructure design, construction, operation, maintenance, and management to foster digital transformation. Today, I'm honored to welcome you all to the episode 18, Cities in the Age of Artificial Intelligence, How to Leverage Technology for Digital Transformation, while providing an insight into how the thematic group will advance its work in the future. We will also have the opportunity to learn more about how the U4SSC reports can be adopted through regions through U4SSC hubs. We have a session with 3 wonderful speakers that are Mrs. Shazade Jameson, author of the report AI and Cities from Tilburg Law School, Dr. Orkan Gerey, leader of U4SSC thematic group on guiding principles for artificial intelligence in cities, and Cristina Martinez, DG Connect, the European Commission. So without further delay, I will let the floor to Mrs. Shazade Jameson as first speaker. Shaz works as a consultant on strategic analysis and effective communication for public sector governance. She specializes in urban AI policy, and she was principal investigator for the AI and cities collaboration between MILA Quebec Artificial Intelligence Institute and UN Habitat, as well as with the Global Observatory on Urban AI on understanding accountability initiatives in urban AI. So Shaz, the floor is yours.
Let me share my screen. So hi, everyone. My name is Shaz Jameson, and today I'm going to talk about AI in cities, the kind of opportunities, some of the risks and limitations, and some of the key strategic points for governance. And first, I want to say thanks to ITU and the U4SSC for inviting me. It's really a pleasure to be here. As Tanya mentioned, I'll be focusing most of my presentation today on the AI and Cities report, which was a collaboration between Mila AI Quebec Ethics Institute, the Mila Quebec AI Institute, forgive me, and UN Habitat, which is the UN Organization for Cities and Settlements. It was quite a comprehensive report looking at an extensive risk framework, lots of applications existing in cities, and a urban AI strategy with a set of like 20 recommendations that are very action-oriented. My presentation, I'm also kind of surfacing insights from some of the recent work that I've done, notably the recent report from the Global Observatory of Urban Artificial Intelligence, where we've been looking at accountability and transparency initiatives like the algorithm registers, like algorithmic auditing that have been implemented on the ground to see what is working well, what isn't, and what lessons are learned for cities. I've also developed together with colleagues the data governance clinics, which is a new approach to a sort of workshop style for cities who are seeking to implement technology locally, but would like to do so aligned with the public interest and want to understand how to operationalize the public interest and whose definition of the public interest into data governance structures and architectures. Finally, I'm completing my PhD at the Tilburg Institute for Law, Technology and Society on technology policy in Singapore. And what I share today comes out of all of these different perspectives. So how is AI used in cities? And I'll start with briefly that there are many different kinds of artificial intelligence. A key distinction is between symbolic AI and statistical methods. Symbolic AI has predefined rules like when the traffic light is red, stop. Whereas statistical methods like deep learning and machine learning, these are more adaptive, they learn and evolve much more over time. So a lot of the interest and buzz around the development of artificial intelligence is happening from kind of more statistical methods. I'm not a technical person, so I don't go deep into detail here. What I will say is that in the AI in Cities report, it's the first time that there's that I've seen a very clear, easy to understand definition of what is AI and how does it work. So I invite you to check that out. For the purposes of today's conversation, what's interesting is that AI is always, by definition, in social context. It's defined by that social context, it interacts with that social context, and it has impacts on. So I want to look at how is AI used in cities and what does that mean for urban development and sustainable urban development. Principally, I'm interested in the use of AI by cities as city governments and city organizations. I'm aware that there's so much potential for the development and use of AI for impact on urban development by the private sector. But I believe that if we give local innovators kind of the enabling conditions, they can develop in that way and in their methods, whereas this is really focused around supporting governments and governmental organizations. So the way that we see AI being used in cities, there's kind of two broad categories. The first is automation, and by that I mean automating existing bureaucratic processes or existing urban services, so that there is a logic of a process that already exists, and one part of that process is going to be automated with the assistance of AI and kind of made faster, made more efficient. The second category of types of AI is more data-driven predictive modeling, and that's a different approach in the sense that the starting point is to have a lot of data. Out of that data, we derive insights, and based on those insights, we design new processes. So while these two types of functions may use the same type of AI, kind of on a technical level, the way that the AI is embedded within the functionality and processes of the city differs. And that's important to think about because it changes how we work with development. So for example, This is the municipal data strategy for ethical AI of the city of Barcelona. It's quite good. So if that's interesting, please do go check it out. As a citizen in Barcelona, if I need assistance from social services, I can go to the social services center. Excuse me. And I walk into the center, I register for an appointment, I have an interview with a caseworker who goes over my situation. That caseworker then takes that interview and compares it to previous cases and looks up, other suggestions of what are the resources, what are the next steps to recommend, comes back and then assists me as a citizen. There was a local collaboration of different parties that came together and designed a machine learning algorithm to support the caseworker based on a corpus of, I think, like 300,000 interviews. This machine learning algorithm helps with that recommendation process of identifying what are the next steps, what are recommended resources, what are suggested ways forward. It supports the caseworker. The caseworker, their job is now easier because they don't have to go through and do all of this manual checking. It's kind of very like paperwork heavy thing. But importantly, the caseworker is still has the ultimate decision. The person who has all of the experience and knowledge of working and interfacing with people, they're still the final go-to. But the process of intake at social services still looks the same. It's just easier and faster. The second example is from the city of Montreal, where the Mila Institute is based. Montreal is in Quebec in Canada. It gets quite cold. A lot of their houses are made of wood. And there, locally, they developed in-house a predictive algorithm to check fire risk. They have fire trucks. So when there is a fire in the city of Montreal, they have fire trucks which go out and then deal with the fire. And the problem is around how to allocate the resources of where should the fire trucks be distributed. I really like this example because the way that the prediction is done is not only on historical data around where fires break out, but also connecting that with the a database around construction material and building materials. To me, that's really interesting because if you were to provide me with a database of here's all of the construction material in the city, I wouldn't necessarily know what to do with it. But because they have the people working there have the understanding that this is what connects to fire risk, that is a local understanding that allows us to connect databases in a uniquely, locally relevant manner to generate predictive insights that lead to cost savings and, saving lives potentially in the case of fire risks. So this is very interesting, is like using local knowledge for contextually appropriate connections, combining the power of both local expertise and machine learning. This is very exciting to me, and this is where I would like to see more work being done. So AI is limited in quite fundamental ways, that it's very important that we keep that in mind as we're looking at how to develop AI in cities. The first is that AI systems reinforce the assumptions in their data and design, always. So the saying is garbage in, garbage out. If you have biased data, you will have a biased algorithm. The common example is that if there was a chatbot that was created to assist in that had to identify job positions, but because the data set was historically biased along gendered lines, there was very little data of female doctors, which meant that the chatbot couldn't associate as easily females with roles like doctor or lawyer, and instead would associate them with historically gendered positions like nurse or secretary. For people who are working around this area, it's also quite important because there's a lot of work that's been done recently around data protection. And sensitive data categories are often required to be excluded from algorithmic decisions, like ethnicity, race, sexual orientation. But some of those, sensitive data categories can still be inferred through proxy, and that might still have bias in the algorithm, even if the data itself is not labeled as such. So this is quite a structural thing that needs to be attended to. An AI system cannot evaluate its own performance. AI doesn't have a sense of right and wrong, doesn't know what's good or not good. All of these things are determined by what we want. What is the purpose that we want the AI to do? There is an objective function that an algorithm has been designed to achieve, and it knows if it deviates from that or not. This is important because it means that as humans interacting and developing AI, we really need to define what is our objective and what are the values that we want to design. Particularly because the characteristic of machine learning algorithms is that they evolve over time. So that means that you have an originally defined function that will shift. And as it shifts, we start to learn what other things could this be used for. That's an incredibly powerful capacity. It challenges a lot of the issues around let's develop safeguards that may no longer be fit for purpose if the function has evolved. That's why I keep telling people that the most important is to develop monitoring over time so that you can inspect and take an honest look at what's going on and adapt if needed at 3, 6, 12 months, 2 years down the line, precisely to deal and respond to the adaptive nature of algorithms. The third is that AI systems are mathematical and cannot integrate nuance. This is important because there's many different types of knowledges which go into sustainable urban development. You have codified mathematical knowledge, absolutely. You also have the knowledge from experience. You have contextual embedded knowledge. You have indigenous knowledges. You have just having an understanding from having lived in the city of what it's like, the way things function. So these types of knowledges need to be combined with what AI is based on and not just have one source alone. It needs to be a complementary and sharing of all of these different kinds of knowledges. It also means that as we are developing AI, we really need to emphasize the importance of local expertise and not just importing solutions and thinking that you can plug and play. Lastly, I will mention that AI systems are part of wider political structures, and there's a tremendous potential for AI to do good and to do so responsibly. It won't address the larger structures and larger challenges that are out there, particularly around accountability challenges. A lot of the questions we see around algorithmic accountability, it's accountability to whom and for what. And those are sometimes more challenging questions. So this is the AI lifecycle approach. It's a framework to think about all the different timeline of the algorithm and what happens from its conception to, deployment, maintenance, and ultimately retirement. It's quite useful. It's also quite extensive. So it's also an invitation to check out the report. Each phase has an associated set of risks. Each phase also has a set of evaluative questions which can be used to mitigate those risks. It's a useful framework also because it acts as an interface with more technical people and social people. It's one point where communication can go more smoothly across disciplines. And it really helps with operationalizing what do we actually want to do. So one of the things that I've seen work quite well is to have the different phases of the AI lifecycle. And then along the top is to have existing policies that are in place for impact assessments, ethical, value-driven development, and to start to outline at what point do these intersect, and to identify where existing capacities are, but also where there are gaps and where the further work needs to be done. Yeah. So there's two major takeaways that I would love everyone watching this to come away with. The first is that capacity building is really, really important. Yes, city governments need to invest in having more technical capacity. Absolutely. At the same time, we also can recognize that, lots and lots of top-end engineers will be looking for salaries that are available in the private sector, not in cities that already have, constrained budgets. So what I suggest instead is to, invest in your people to have the capacity for oversight of technical development. This means understanding what AI is, what it looks like, at which points can we build, interdisciplinary collaboration, and also connecting with initiatives that are working around increasing procurement capacities, which we see a lot of in Europe at the moment. Second, monitoring is key because things change, things grow, AI learns, people learn. The pace of evolution is quite fast. So we need to build processes that allow us to inspect and adapt and monitor over time across several moments in time. So capacity building and monitoring. These are my big takeaways. And lastly, before I end, I'm very excited working on AI in cities because I really think it's a catalyst for next generation leadership. I think there's so much potential for cities as leaders to kind of step up and assume their role in kind of defining what is the direction for the city. City leaders are uniquely positioned to combine both private and public sectors, to see what's happening in the city, to talk to the civic, NGOs, to bring it all together. That's quite a unique position. And I'm very excited when cities want to bring a vision to that. I think one of the key potentials of cities is to create the enabling conditions for collaboration and local innovation in supporting startups, in supporting collaboration, in building these local knowledge networks, in having adaptive regulation that can support this kind of direction in a value-driven way. This is something very exciting. And in the AI in Cities report, we have I think 20 recommendations on how to develop an urban AI strategy that is locally relevant for cities, including specifics of like looking at algorithmic impact assessments and data sharing standards and things like that. But I would invite you to check that out because I think that's really the way forward for next generation leadership. So that's it. Thank you very much, Merci.
Shasel, for sharing that holistic view on the AI systems and the great examples provided. Now, our second speaker is Dr. Okan Jirai, that has more than 20 years of experience in management, consulting in various industries, and has consulted for several organizations all over the world, and working in Dubai e-government, Dubai smart government, smart Dubai office, and in Dubai digital authority. And he has co-chaired the Enhancing Innovation and Participation Working Group in U4SSC by addressing smart governance, smart economy, and smart people aspects in smart cities. Okan, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Tanya, thank you so much for your kind words. I think you were exaggerating a bit. Well, it's an honor and pleasure actually for me to be here in this webinar addressing the participants and the audience. As Dr. Barbara mentioned at the beginning, and also as Tanya mentioned in her introductory speech, U4SSC is a global policy platform supported by 17 UN agencies, and it conducts its work under thematic groups. And one of the thematic groups, which I have been actually humbled to lead, is the one on AI. It's called the Guiding Principles for AI in Cities. So if you allow me to share my screen, I'm going to go through the work that we have conducted in this thematic group, which I have just introduced actually briefly. It's the Guiding Principles for AI in Cities. So the work that we have conducted In terms of the scope, in fact, we intended intentionally to formulate a principles-based framework for implementing AI, artificial intelligence in cities. So the work actually was not about identifying a comprehensive list of AI solutions, because we will not be even able to do justice if we undertook the effort of identifying potential list of AI solutions. As you can imagine, cities, there's a plethora of AI solutions in cities today, which span almost every domain that's applicable in an urban context. So that was not the intention of the work of this thematic group, but rather it was about providing guidance in terms of principles in implementing artificial intelligence for smart and sustainable cities. So that's almost kind of clarified the scope for us. Within that context, we have actually identified 4 areas to address within this thematic group. The first one was the principles, the second one was the enablers, the third is governance, and the fourth one was kind of a simple implementation methodology to put the AI principles into reality in an urban context. And the work that we have conducted, again, I want to mention it very clearly, it's technology agnostic. So we were not actually looking into any of the technology issues. And it's a framework in the sense that the 4 things that I mentioned, be it principles, enablers, governance, or the implementation methodology itself, are flexible enough so that cities can adopt them, tailor them based on their own particular context. We're not, in other words, telling the cities that this is the list of principles, for example, that you should adopt. We're rather telling them a list of principles from which they can choose. They can either choose all of them, or they can choose a subset of those and identify the ones that are relevant to them. I think we have to be cautious, because the context of cities today differs from city to city in general. There are large cities, small cities, challenges are different, AI needs are different. So we have to be cautious, I think, in the way you implement this framework. So we made it quite flexible to accommodate the different needs of cities as part of the overall approach that we have taken. And the same argument applies to enablers as well. We came up with a long list of enablers that we have thought about, and the cities, again, can mix and match among those to suit their needs. Again, the governance approach can be customized, and even the implementation methodology. So we've kind of tried to make it as flexible as we can. And the 4 things that I mentioned, I will briefly go through them. So the work was conducted by 4 working groups, which are addressing the 4 things that I just mentioned to you. And we had actually co-leaders, as you can see, with the exception of working group 1, we had only 1 leader that have undertaken the work and have done a fantastic job of coming up with all the content around it. And then I was just lucky to aggregate all those ideas together into a single unified document. So basically what we have done is we have identified, in fact, in the first section in principles, 2 things basically: a set of principles that cities can adopt, and also implementation considerations very briefly for each and every principle. So within the principles, actually, I have not listed because the document is still in a draft format, but we have come up with things like, for the principles themselves for artificial intelligence, for example, lawful, privacy preserving, fair, accountable, transparent, safe and secure, preserving human autonomy, robust, high performance, sustainable. So these are kind of examples of the principles that we came up with. And then we have also very briefly identified some implementation considerations. If you look at the existing documents today and the city's principles that have been adopted in the past, let's say 5 years or so, we have again a long list of actually principles that have been formulated. So rather than reinventing the wheel, what we did is kind of leveraged on what's out there available, but maybe identified a few implementation considerations for cities to think about. So we've taken more of a pragmatic approach rather than a theoretical one. So let me just give you an example. If we say privacy preserving, for example, in the implementation considerations, we have mentioned things like maybe anonymizing data sets, using synthetic data, for example, or allowing the users of the systems, for example, to give consent on the use of their private data, or data protection policies, for example. These are things that cities, again, can consider to implement the relevant AI principles for them. So we've kind of gone one step further beyond the principles themselves and highlighted some implementation considerations in the document, in the draft deliverable for the thematic group. Then what we have done is, as I mentioned, so let's say a city came up with a list of the principles that they want to implement as part of their AI solutions. They can use enablers to expedite or to boost or to accelerate the implementation of these principles. So we've come up with 4 categories of enablers almost. The first one is the leadership, governance, and regulations. So the cities can come up with certain, let's say, regulations, policies that are already existing at the city level, or they can formulate new ones to boost the implementation of AI principles. Even an AI strategy without the principles will actually help in a normal case. So the cities would know what AI use cases they will be undertaking. They can, for example, adopt corresponding AI principles, relevant AI principles in that case. So there's a list actually under each and every one of these categories, as you see, to help accelerate the implementation of AI principles. Similarly, AI, for example, the second one is about capacity and skills building. Maybe there are 2 sides to it. Building skills in the core, hardcore AI skills is an important issue. But to be honest with you, one of the challenges that cities face today, practically on the ground, is also the understanding of the principles themselves. Sometimes the principles are at a very high level stated, but how can they put it on the ground and make it a reality is a challenge for cities. So building capacity, not only in terms of solutions, but also in terms of principles, is going to be important. Similarly, other things like city system enablers. Again, R&D, for example, not only in terms of AI solutions, but also R&D in terms of how to implement AI principles is an important area. Do we need new startups to help, for example, the public sectors or the private sectors in the cities to implement AI principles? So we can almost build an ecosystem of not only AI solutions, but also AI principles solution providers for the correct implementation, to govern AI in the right manner. And then technology platforms and infrastructure that exist in the city are also going to be very helpful in general. So these enablers are helping the implementation of AI principles, which was the previous step. So how can we, augment these principles? How can we make them practical on the ground, implementable, are one of the objectives behind the enablers. So other than the enablers, one other thing that we thought about is we want to instill or inculcate these principles within an urban context. But 3 things are also important. How do we regulate AI principles or AI even in general? How do we execute? In other words, how do we implement AI principles in reality? And how can we ensure that the city organizations, for example, city administrations, comply with those principles? So we have come up some suggestions here for cities. For example, if we take regulation, which is the, let's say, development of AI principles themselves, what are the alternatives that cities have today? One of them might be a centralized approach, whereby a city organization in charge of, let's say, digital transformation, for example, undertakes the regulatory side of AI principles, formulates them in a centralized manner, but maybe with in consultation with the relevant entities in the city. In fact, in Dubai, we have taken this approach. Smart Dubai and today Digital Dubai Authority is the centralized entity to do the regulatory side of it. So we are actually formulating principles, but in consultation with all the city entities in general. We can take another approach. We can completely decentralize principles. Each and every city agency can have its own principles that are relevant to them. So that might be another alternative, or it can be a hybrid of those. Certain centralized ones can be implemented in the urban context, but sector-specific AI principles can also be undertaken. For example, healthcare might go beyond just the let's say, common denominator of AI principles and can identify and formulate their own specific AI principles pertaining to their specific sector. So healthcare, education, or even other private sectors might do things like this. So same argument applies to executive. In terms of implementation, now that we have these principles, how do we implement them? Do we implement principles, not the AI solutions, but the principles in a centralized manner? Is there a single agency that does that, or is it decentralized? Implementation is decentralized, or it's a hybrid method. Similarly for compliance, how do we ensure that these principles are enacted, are in action, are practically on the ground being implemented? How do we ensure compliance? Do we centralize compliance audits? Do we decentralize them, or do we have a hybrid approach? So these are alternatives that cities can adopt in terms of instilling or inculcating these principles in their own urban context. So again, as I mentioned at the beginning, this is a framework. We're not telling them do it in the centralized way or do it in the decentralized way. We're telling them the options for cities to select from based on their own challenges. Another thing that we have done is, so what are some of the policy instrument alternatives that cities have? These principles, should they be a law? Should they be a regulation? Should they be a policy? Or should it be a guideline? As you can see, the level of enforcement actually varies with respect to these policy instrument alternatives. What we see in general in the cities for AI principles is probably less enforcing to start with. So most cities today undertake the guideline approach. Some of them maybe move up the ladder to either policy or regulation level, and then all the way up to the law level is in their almost radar for the future. So this is, it can be a maturity almost in general. We know AI is a very innovative technology. It's moving very fast, and regulations are almost following this innovation with a bit of falling behind. And unfortunately, that's the reality for most cities. So it will be up to the city what kind of enforcement approach they want to take in terms of implementing these principles. And finally, we also have a very simple 4-step methodology for implementing these principles in their urban context. So the first step is all about baselining, understanding what principles they have today, what enablers they have, whether they have a policy or not, whether they have a governance mechanism in place. So we're just trying to understand what's out there available in the city. The second step, which is determine guiding principles, says, okay, this is the landscape today, this is the baseline. If there are no principles, then here is the target set of, let's say, guiding principles, which the city will adopt. The next step says, okay, if these are the set of principles, what enablers can we use to boost the implementation, to accelerate, to expedite the implementation of these principles? What policy instrument alternative should we use? Do we have a roadmap for it? And what maybe governance mechanism should we adopt? Should we centralize the regulation, the execution, and the compliance mechanisms? Or should we use a mix and match of those methods? Centralized maybe regulation, decentralized, let's say, execution, maybe centralized or hybrid approach for compliance, for example. So step 3 decides how we can boost the implementation of these principles. And finally, as you can imagine, we assess the results, which feeds back to step number 1 again. So it's a cycle of almost implementation in terms of these principles. So basically, this is what we have done in the thematic group. It's a very flexible framework, as I mentioned, that cities can use to inculcate the principles in their own context. Again, I want to mention that this is not about AI implementation per se, but this is about AI principles implementation. Thank you, Tanya.
Thank you. Thank you, Okan, for that very impressive work you are carrying out in the thematic group. And last but not least, our third speaker is Cristina Martinez, who started her career in the United Nations working for an IT track and trace software project for railways in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. Then she joined an international consulting company to work for the technology department as a solution engineer, and she became a member of the staff of the European Commission in 2002. She worked as a senior administrator for research in the Information Society, Directorate General, where she led the Enterprise Interoperability Cluster for many years. Cristina, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Tana. And I will, while I'm sharing the screen, first say that I'm very grateful to be invited here and show and present the European Commission perspective on how urban and also regional communities can adopt AI for reaching their purposes and addressing their challenges. But also, I'm very grateful that I have had these very nice introductions from my fellow speakers, because they have actually set up a number of important conditions before implementing AI, which have to do with making sure that AI works for the society. And that requires indeed having a number of principles well identified, and then understanding how this can be developed and what are the boundaries necessary for developing AI solutions in a way that are compatible with the legal, but also the ethical and the cultural context in which they're developed. So I will not give you more details on why we think that indeed AI can bring, while well implemented and in this necessary circumstances, respecting a number of principles, why we think that AI can bring a lot of benefits to cities and communities. I'm just quoting here a report by McKinsey Global Institute, which says a lot. Yes, if properly implemented, we can help manage infrastructures better, so reducing consumption, lower CO2 emissions, and we can also improve parts of the system if we look at an urban environment as a system, like for instance improving mobility in cities. And we have a lot of applications already in Europe that demonstrate this. This is why we think that AI is already here, and we needed to have the proper policy framework to accompany this development that is still in its infancy. Just as the webinar is a teenager, the series of webinars here at a teenager stage, AI is still learning actually, and is still trying to understand the world in which it's developed. Hence, we thought that it was necessary to have a proper framework to welcome and accompany this development in Europe. So we've published last year 3 important documents. One of them is a communication on fostering a European approach to AI, which actually matches a lot of the principles that were developed in the report of U4SCC. And then we reviewed an action plan on artificial intelligence that was set up long ago with the support of a number of high-level experts. It's now reviewed. It was reviewed, by the way, in April last year. It's called the Coordinated Plan on Artificial Intelligence. It was approved and worked with member states. So it's an important document that states a number of actions that we will take in our different policy areas. And then we made a proposal for a regulation to lay down harmonized rules on AI. It is called in Europe the AI Act. This document is again very important because it's reflecting on some of the important elements that we heard before. Thank you, Charles, for this great introduction. There are issues like trust and accountability, liability, safety, ethical aspects that need to be taken into account. And this regulation is trying to address some of those issues. Let me tell you in perhaps more detail what it contains that is of direct relevance for smart cities and communities. In the action plan, and I'm reading here, the Commission will continue to support public administrations, including cities and communities, in procuring trustworthy AI. 1, by developing a set of minimal capabilities for algorithms to be used in contract conditions through the Living in EU movement and by other means. And I'll come back to what this means. And then support public administrations, including cities and communities, in creating AI algorithm registries to increase citizen trust and encourage the use of catalogs of AI-enabled applications. And finally, for administrations to increase the take-up of AI by the public sector, for example, through the Europe AI On Demand platform. So these are 3 different initiatives. Allow me to develop them and to explain why we think they were necessary. First of all, we worked with cities like Amsterdam in a number of workshops, open workshops, and we tried to come up with examples of how to implement good conditions for developing solutions in cities that contain AI. They were addressing these 3 important aspects: procedural transparency, so explaining what the purpose of the algorithm is and what is the expected outcome; technical transparency also, so that is to give insights on the technical operations of the algorithm, for instance, disclosing the source code that is running behind, and then explainability. So that is making the decision-making process of the algorithm as clear as possible for users or for citizens who are being exposed to an AI decision-making system. Of course, this is not perfect, and this is actually very complicated because as Shaz was, I think, suggesting, some of these AI technologies can be seen as black boxes. So it's not always easy to understand or even to predict how an algorithm will develop along the time. So this is why we have also thought that it would be necessary to store those algorithms in a registry, because we know that they are trained and they're somehow monitored properly by the authorities, and these are the algorithms that we think would be trustworthy and therefore that can be reused by other cities. So it was for us very important to have both aspects well catered. And then the Living in EU community, which is a bottom-up initiative in Europe of cities who are developing digitalization the EU way, are working together on testing those clauses in the context of the Digital Public Buyers Group. So as I said, we need to properly store those algorithms in what we call registers, and Amsterdam and Helsinki have already started saving those registers, those algorithms. I hope you can see me because I had an issue with my screen. So the registries have a purpose, which is basically to openly share what is already working. Eurocities, that is a European network of cities in Europe, has started the Digital Forum Lab and will now develop common procurement guidelines for those local AI registries. And then finally, from a technical viewpoint, the Open and Agile Smart Cities Network will be working in the context of the technical subgroup, which actually will certainly look at what the U4SCC working group on AI has been done. We'll develop a fair AI minimum interoperability mechanism to automate AI register functionalities. And then third, we wanted to set up a catalog of AI-enabled applications. We call it the AI on Demand platform, or AI for Europe.eu. That is a project that is storing now a number of existing applications that we think are fit for purpose and that can be reused in different contexts. So it's a platform that will help sharing a lot of knowledge, transferring existing applications and knowledge to other places, that will help our communities to collaborate and further research on some of these issues. So we've implemented this legislative package through a number of different initiatives, like the Digital Europe program, which is a deployment program. And in this program, we have been addressing different issues. First, we have been supporting the deployment of data, because there is no good AI if you don't have curated quality data. So that is the creation of the data space for smart cities and communities that just started. And then we are also willing to procure what we call a local digital twin toolbox, which is basically the building blocks for setting up a digital twin at the local level to support actually the deployment of AI services that are addressing cities' issues. And so we will progressively fund capabilities within cities and communities in Europe that will be able to make use of useful AI applications. We will also fund a number of projects that will develop AI applications, more sophisticated AI applications, and hopefully set up expertise in Europe, across Europe, through what we call the digital innovation hubs. It's a little bit like what Barbara has done in Austria with the U4SCC national hub, but we do it in a more specialized way in different regions of Europe through with what we call the network of digital innovation hubs. So I hope that there will be room for collaboration here. I trust it is definitely something that we would like to explore explore together. And then finally, perhaps something that is very important also is to say that in the legislation, there is a very important aspect which says that AI algorithms that have been developed outside of Europe need to be trained in Europe, because as Shaz mentioned in her introduction, there is a lot of bias, there is a cultural context that influences the way the algorithm will develop and behave, actually, that is unavoidable. So we want to have any AI solution that cities want to deploy to be tested or trained actually in what we call a testing facility. And so we have just launched an initiative called Testing and Experimentation Facility for Smart Cities and Communities that will offer for free this environment to any city who is willing to, to develop an AI application. So many initiatives which I think are demonstrating that it is possible to accompany an AI development that is, let's say, putting the power of AI at the service of citizens and local authorities in a way, again, that is compatible with the EU legislation and policy. There are many other developments that I don't have time to detail today, but which I think are worth to have a look at. So I'm giving you some of the references. It's the Adopt AI program. There's a project called AI for Cities, which is deploying a number of solutions for carbon neutrality. And the AI Watch laboratory of our joint research center that is also proposing a number of interesting reports. Here are the references. One is the AI for the public sector, and the second one is the study on uptake of emerging technologies in public procurement. A very last slide on my side, which I think is something maybe that we want to put forward as a reflection question. It's the necessity to think of AI as something that cannot be contained in one definition. As Jazz explained in the beginning, there are different ways of developing artificial intelligence and different techniques. And some of the techniques that are considered in existing legislation are the typical machine learning technologies. But there are other types like agent-based algorithms or self-organized algorithms, which are much more difficult to apprehend actually. And you cannot very easily determine how their prediction capacity will evolve. So that is something that we need to consider it. And another issue is also that, as I said before, I mean, there is a limit to transparency and explainability of AI algorithms because they are by definition unpredictable in their behaviors. So we will have to work on a bottom-up algorithm playing with the interaction rules to perhaps avoid what I would call the emergence of undesirable behavior. So these are just two topics which I think are perhaps food for thought, but we can also discuss many other examples that cities have been putting in place in Europe, and hopefully also discussing potential collaboration at a global level. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Christina, for sharing the view of the European Commission and the ongoing initiatives with cities that for sure will revert in future regulation and likely standardization work. I would like to thank all the speakers for this comprehensive analysis and of the situation, and would like to ask them specific questions. The first is to Shaz. What is a simple action that everyone can do right away to leverage artificial intelligence for local digital transformation? Please.
Thank you, Tanya. The first thing I would say is to invest in your people. If that's possible through budgeting, that's where we see the most direct impact happening in places that have built a culture of supporting your talent in-house. But really simply is to just talk to your local community. I mean, part of this webinar is about cities and communities, and that means speaking to the people around you on the ground, identifying local pain points, and identifying what technical capacities exist, what digital infrastructures exist, and how can we catalyze these to bring these together for local impact. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My second question is to Okan. How do you see the importance of data with respect to AI principles implementation?
Thank you, Tanya. If we think about artificial intelligence, actually, it's very much tied, very closely tied with the data, with the underlying data, I would say. So the algorithms are actually performing certain things, but on the underlying data itself. So if you look at the principles, things like lawful, privacy preserving, bias, or being fair, for example, unbiased, these are not only depending on the algorithms, because in most cases, algorithms are almost agnostic and they are neutral. But these algorithms are shaped. The parameters of these algorithms are determined by the underlying data. So my humble suggestion would be, and we put it in the draft deliverable also, is as we look at the AI principles and try to apply them, we should probably apply the same principles to the data itself as well. So if we talk about, for example, privacy, the algorithm should be private by design, but also maybe we should think about the privacy issues of the data itself as well. If we think about unbiased, for example, results, or eliminating the bias from AI algorithms, again, the algorithm itself is not necessarily putting the bias. Things like machine learning, actually, the bias is not in the algorithm, but it's almost shaped by the data, the underlying data itself. So it's very important to not only consider the principles with respect to AI itself, but also the data. I would recommend actually cities that are undertaking AI principles implementation to almost split. I know it's a bit of a hard work, but to split these principles into AI and also data and try and apply it to both. I think they will get much better results. For example, certain algorithms, another example might be maybe performance or robustness of an AI algorithm. Again, the algorithm's robustness, meaning how much it changes, for example, in the face of perturbations or differences. It's not the algorithm necessarily. The data itself actually makes the algorithm either very sensitive or very robust with respect to changes. So all these principles that are almost defined at the AI level, in fact, are in most cases applicable to the data itself. So I would humbly recommend cities to consider data and AI with respect to these principles almost independently. Not necessarily in all cases, but almost independently to both. Thank you, Tanya.
Thank you, Okan. And the question to Christina is, how can public authorities support the adoption of trustworthy and sustainable artificial intelligence by cities and communities? And if possible, to give us an example.
Thank you, Tanya. Well, I think I can build on what Okan just said, and I fully agree with you, Okan, actually, that the data is as important as the algorithm. And in that respect, I think cities have a responsibility in first creating data, but also, I mean, yeah, we need to accept the fact that if we use multiple sector data, it's going to become very, very uncontrollable at some point. So there is a huge challenge actually for cities in this respect. My advice would be to lead by example and start working with very simple questions and develop solutions that are, let's say, easily explainable to citizens, work in full transparency from the framing and design phases to liaise with what Jazz was saying earlier on, and use public procurement as an incentive also to launch solutions that are let's say abiding by the principles that the city together with its citizens would define as acceptable approaches to deploy solutions that contain AI. So in Europe, we have decided to push for procurement. We have a number of examples in the context of the digital program, where we will be supporting the development of AI solutions for very specific purposes, because that's again another source of concern. We want to deploy AI for a purpose. And so these purposes have to do with climate change, extreme weather event, sustainability, and sustainable mobility in general. So that is for us a good motivation actually to help and give this impetus maybe local authorities need to deploy AI solutions. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much to all three. And once again, and now I hand back to our moderator, Victoria, please.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ms. Marcos, and speakers for the fantastic session. I'd like to now give the floor to Ms. Cristina Buetti, Counselor of ITUT Study Group 20 and focal point on environment and smart sustainable cities at ITU, to provide us with her closing remarks. Ms. Buetti, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Victoria, and thank you so much to the moderator and the excellent speakers, which really shared with us a lot of insights and a lot of, I think, important consideration when we discuss the theme of artificial intelligence and the use of AI in cities. We have heard that AI can drive digital transformation in cities by serving as a driver and enabler for improving efficiency of urban operations, competitiveness, it can be used also for environmental protection while aiming to improve the overall quality of life of its current as well as future inhabitants. And during the panel discussion, we had also the opportunity to appreciate and learn the work that is being carried out in the framework of the thematic group on guiding principles for AI in cities under the United for Smart Sustainable City initiative, which is led by Dr. Okan, and in particular, the framework developed by this thematic group is really the result of painstaking work conducting on understanding AI-based governance policies and regulation, coupled with the analysis of case studies showcasing successful AI application. And just a kind reminder that this thematic group, as we have heard, is currently on its next leg of activities, for which it is scouting also for relevant use cases on AI in cities. So please feel free to reach out to Dr. Gerai or to us in case you have any relevant use cases that you would like to share. Another aspect that caught my attention through the discussion and the presentation was that of AI governance in cities, which, like digital governance, combines, regulation, ethics, norms, and social practices. So in this context, building on what Shaz mentioned during her presentation, knowledge sharing is important for urban development, and therefore local knowledge is also important and go hand in hand with AI adoption. I'd like also to take the opportunity to commend the efforts of the European Commission for stressing the need for procuring trustworthy AI and the development of AI for Europe platform and AI for cities initiative to facilitate really knowledge transfer on this topic, along with the AI legislative package presented by Cristina Martinez, which is really envisioned as a front runner for guidance on AI deployment in cities. On the implementation side, we also saw the wonderful work done by the EU4SC Country Hub in Austria, led by Dr. Barbara Kohm, which is now are functioning as the epicenter for coordination of digital transformation and also to enhance the implementation of the EU4SC key performance indicators. So based really on the commendable expertise and the work done by the U4SSC hub in Austria, we anticipate more such hubs to take on the baton and further the implementation activities of U4SSC worldwide. So needless to say that we count on all of your support. And when I say you know, here I'm referring to all the participants that are gathered, that you know, are attending this webinar, who really contribute also to the work of the ITU, the U4SSC, and also the other organizations that presented their activities during this webinar. So as I said, we will continue really to organize these webinars as an opportunity to share information, to learn from each other. I also would like to take this opportunity to certainly move forward with the possibility to collaborate together. You know, by building synergies, we can have a greater impact. And with that, I would like to conclude my remarks. For all questions in the chat, we will share it with the different speakers, and we will get back to you. I wish you really, all of you, a great day ahead, and stay tuned for the next digital transformation webinar. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. The webinar is now closed.